And this episode of We Need to Talk is brought to you by Black Brew, the darkest, richest, boldest coffee anywhere.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of We Need to Talk. I'm your host, Malynda, and I'm joined by my co-host, Karmel Humphrey, who's back with me this week.
What is up?
And this week, if you have been following me on social media, if you know anything about my life, you know who our special guest is. He is very vocal on my Facebook page, on my Twitter, in my life. He steals my friends. We have Drexel Hurd, who is a Democratic political strategist. He is my brother. He is one of my best friends, and he's got a lot to say. So welcome, Drexel.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I know
Thanks
this is
for
what you've all been waiting for.
Yes.
They're actually having people, when I said Drexel's coming, they're like, yes, I can't wait to hear Drexel. If you don't follow us on Facebook, like, we're always talking about something.
Right.
Like, it's just hilarious.
And I always have to comment because, you give the people what they want.
Yeah, and you're like the gift king. He has gifts for everything, Karmel. Like, I'm just like, where do you find it? And you find it so quickly, too.
Yeah. It's, I have to think about it, but I have to make sure that it makes sense. And I have to, I'm like, how... Because I'm not a naturally funny person in person.
Yes, you are.
No.
But what I mean to say is I'm quicker.
Yeah.
I'm quicker via text.
You are
We sent
very
a group
quick.
text today, and it was.
It went off the rails. Yes.
But
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. But I wish I was like that in person. I wish I was quicker enough in person. I'd be a comedian.
I think you are quick, but when you text, you're actually filtering it through your fingers.
Right.
I think you slow down in person because you're like, should I say that?
Right. Maybe that's what it is.
That's true.
I'm
That's
definitely
true.
much of a.
Yeah.
I'm definitely
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. Well, we have a lot to talk about this week, and the couple of things that we're going to be touching on. We're going to talk about cancel culture, which I had to explain to Karmel and Drexel what that was when I was like, we're talking
about.
about.
It was a TV show.
Which I would watch.
Oh my
That
God!
just sounds fun.
Cancel culture. That is a good title
That's a
for a
great title.
television
Maybe
show.
it could have been the title of this podcast.
It could have been.
Cancel culture,
Right.
but that's we're going to talk about it. I'm not for it. So we're talking cancel culture. If you, as you know, Us came out this weekend. We're going to talk a little bit about that style of movie and a couple of other things that Drexel and I went over. We're going to talk about this never-ending list of Democratic candidates and the Mueller report because apparently it's out now, but not to the public, right?
Not to the public.
Well, we're going to get to that, and then. Of course, as you know, at the end of every episode, we do a spotlight on a charity, organization, or a community or person that we think is doing good in the world. All right. So we need to talk about cancel culture first.
Okay.
And if you don't know what cancel culture is, it is the culture of canceling people based on their past mistakes. Now, we've seen this, a rise in this in the last couple of years. I think it probably started with Paula Deen, but she needed to be canceled anyway. But we've seen it with Paula Deen. We've seen it with Aziz Ansari. We've seen it with Kevin Hart. We've seen it with, who are the politicians that recently were canceled because of the racist, the blackface stuff that they just did?
Oh, the one in Virginia.
The governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, and
and
the
then
Attorney General.
exactly, and then what really made me want to talk about this is recently there was a girl who is a musical theater performer. She was cast to play Celie in The Color Purple, and she was canceled because of her views on the LGBT community. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. But every time you say canceled, I'm like, is it like The Giver when they're released?
They're canceled. So when I say canceled, it's just like they basically don't have a career. Oh, and we saw that with what's his name, Nate Parker, with that stuff that happened with him. So. My thing, the problem that I have is at what point do we draw the line? Where do we have grace? Where do we have forgiveness? And where do we allow people the chance to change and right their wrongs from their past? Because if you spend so much time digging up things from 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, like, is there no chance that the person has changed? What do y'all think?
I think it depends on the actual thing they did. Like sometimes some things are just more egregious than others. If it's like I wore a slave outfit to a Halloween party back in '87, okay, that's one thing. And it's 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
But if it was like I went out of my way to call someone out or do something to someone that hurt someone intentionally, you're probably going to do it again. That's probably something that's in your nature. So that's something and still canceling someone's on their entire career. I still even don't know them. But again, if it's hurting someone directly, I think I could see canceling someone out because of that. Especially if you're you're a public figure.
Right.
If your whole job is to help the public and you're doing something to hurt somebody, that probably makes sense. But like if it's just a joke you did back in the day, we all said something, did something stupid. That's
for sure.
Right. I think that there are obviously several instances, and I just look in the political world, whether or not it's Governor Northam or Brett Kavanaugh or Senator Franken in Minnesota, there are certain instances where it's different for a comedian, whether or not you're Kevin Hart, whether or not you're an actor, because I think actors come from, as we know, some come from difficult or sordid pasts in terms of their upbringing. They need to break out of that world, and this is their outlet, was being a performer.
Right.
And what they did in the past obviously does not affect what we see on the screen. In some cases, of course, it might in terms of how they come off in terms as an actor, but then what they do in their public life obviously might be a little bit different. When it comes to elected officials, though, right now, we are in a hypersensitive moment where everything that you do is in the present equally as important, and your past is equally as important. So, where we talk about a 17-year-old Brett Kavanaugh, you could look at it two ways. You can go, well, he was 17 years old. How does that affect his entire judicial career? Are we looking at Brett? Would that be different if we, as more liberal-leaning people, did not think that his politics and his policies were detrimental to the country?
Right.
Yeah.
Would we say, okay, well, that's what you did? And I think that's why some Democrats, and we're going to talk about Kirsten Gillibrand in a little bit, really went after Kirsten Gillibrand, because it was less about what Al Franken did and more about that they wanted to protect one of their own.
Right.
And the Republicans did the exact same thing.
Right.
So with Brett Kavanaugh. So we pick and choose, like, when, based on if we feel like they're one of us.
Of course.
And that's always a problem.
So like with Kevin Hart, like, we celebrate Kevin Hart because of the things he says. So then it's weird to now like punish him for something he said. And even if what's really interesting, especially with like acting and film, you get on screen and play a character that oftentimes is offensive. And if you do it well, you get an award for it. So when someone says something offensive, but then it's funny, I don't get how that's any different. It's what he does. He says offensive things in a funny manner.
Absolutely. So, for me, I just always feel like comedians just get a pass. Like, they say what everybody's thinking, say what everybody's feeling in a funny way, and it's not meant. Their job is to kind of offend everybody. You know what I mean?
But to that point, Tim Allen the other day, there was an article about him that said he feels like comedians should have a pass to say the N-word. So at what point do we say, okay, you can bring that into the into your routine,
Right.
But do we get offended by it, or should we just let them because they get a pass?
Right.
And so we can either say, yep, you can do that, or no, you can't do that. But there can't be a gray area, because there's always going to be somebody offended by something.
Of course.
And I'm at the beginning we talked about how I filter myself sometimes. I'm pretty PC when it comes to what I say in person.
Right.
If you are in a text thread with me, maybe not so much. But but that's to my what we do with our own family and friends. Obviously, if it offends somebody, we bring it up to those people. But once it spills over into the public, I think you, as a public figure, that's coming at some point in your life. So either you can prepare for it or not. I'm always of the school of let that shit out early. If you know it's coming, you can either get in front of it or not.
Right.
And, at this point, I think more politicians in particular should just let it out. Because people will find you more authentic if you start bringing up your problems.
Yeah.
Because everybody goes through problems. Like Stacey Abrams, for example, Republicans tried to really use her debt against her and things that she was going on in her personal life. But if she had got ahead of that and said, this is because we were dealing with some family issues, it was all about my family being sick, and it was all about medical bills and these things like that, people understand that piece of it.
Yeah.
And people will use your negative against you in this hypersensitive chamber because they can't.
Yeah.
And so, you have to certainly do your part to protect you and your family as best as possible. And if that is getting in front of everything, then do that.
So here's a follow-up question for you guys. Do you think, though, at this day and age that we are too hypersensitive about everything?
I think we are, partly because the nature of technology, social media has just made us that way. When we look back in any realm, say 30 years ago, whether it's sports, entertainment, or politics, you just didn't know that much.
Right.
Now I know so much, and like literally Drexel's on his phone right now, probably getting an update.
I am. I'm actually
I'm saying,
Yeah.
something's
The Attorney
happening right
General's
now.
report.
Right, everything's at our fingertips,
Right
literally
now.
at our fingertips.
So then if
yeah.
I don't have it right now, I'm like, why don't I have it right now? There's like a FOMO to all this. Like, what am I missing out on? Like,
Yeah.
so I think the hypersensitivity comes from the fact that it's just available.
Right.
So now if I don't have access to an athlete behind the scenes, I know that it's out there, so I'm going to go find it. If there's
Right.
something out, a politician or an actor or whatever, I know there's some way to get closer to them. So then I honestly don't know why we get surprised when we get closer to human beings and find out that they're human beings.
The other part of that, I think, is that our expectations of what happens next, like because we have it at our fingertips, we expect the conclusion of it just as quick. If something goes wrong, we want it to happen right now. And, it's like jobs. People expect, when you look at tax cuts, or you look at things, or you look at careers, or you look at being an actor here in LA, or you look at being a performer, when you're trying to build something, you expect it to happen. In this day and age, you've got kids who want to be social media influencers because it is instant.
Yeah.
Or, that's what happened with Vine and all of those things. They became instant things, and then people took off and they became these multimillionaires because of 15 seconds. And people assume that that's how it works.
Right.
And that's not always the case. And then people get disappointed, and then people get downtrodden, and then that's how we have Trump. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the reality.
I love
I see that. I like
that.
I like
I
how you
just
put that
love that
together.
path that you just took.
The reality is that people want, because we're so desperate to succeed, is that people want now. People want to know that their family's going to be safe right now. People want to know that they're not going to lose their farms right now.
There's
People
a sense of urgency with everything.
The sense of urgency is really what's making people batshit crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
And I work very quickly in my own personal life. I certainly work with a sense of urgency, whether or not I'm working on a project outside of my normal day job or whatever. It always has to be done very quickly because I have to move on to the next thing. Or
Right.
people are expecting me. They can't move on to the next thing if I'm not done with my piece of it.
Right.
So, but that's the right. Everybody has a different way of working it, but in my head, like, that's the right way of working, which is you can't let people wait for you, and people don't have time to wait for you.
Right.
But in this case, there are so many independent. You don't know what's going to happen in the bigger scheme of things that sometimes you just don't have a choice but to wait.
Very good point. Yeah.
So you being an entertainer, singer, do you feel like you are moving at the pace that you want to move at, and do you feel like there is a expectation for you to be in a certain place that you're not?
Oh God, of course. I always feel like I'm behind, and when I finally get to where I'm going to be, I'm like, well, dang, now they're like 20 yards ahead of me. You're trying to catch up to people and catch up with trends and catch up with, themes in the music industry and all that stuff. Yeah, it's insane. And I mean, I think, are we ever where we want to be though? You know what I mean? I'm the type of person that's always looking for the next thing. Once I accomplish something, I don't really take the time to like settle and be happy and relish in the fact that I accomplished something. I'm like, okay, I did that. What's the next thing? But I think that it's because I'm so influenced by how we are today, how society is, how culture is. We're always looking for the next thing. But I mean, I just like keeping busy, to be honest. I hate having downtime. I hate being bored. But yeah, it's tough, and you're always looking at social media and looking at numbers and looking at people started with iPhone pictures. Now people are taking pictures, just regular selfies with $4,000 cameras, and I'm just like, I can't keep up. Right. It's a problem, but I don't know if it's ever going to change. This is where we are now. You know,
I like to actively relax.
Yeah.
I don't ever see myself just I'm always thinking, what am I not doing?
Right.
And I think that's, again, I think all three of us have that in our nature. But then, as soon as we look at our phone, it's over. Like whatever I was doing, the relaxing, it's done.
And then an hour's gone by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time right before I go to sleep, like reading the news or figuring out what I need to do for the next day.
Right.
And I always joke with my husband Tim, where I'm talking about how I'm not very good at vacations because I'm always thinking about what I need to be doing.
Always.
And I'm constantly being like, I need to be doing some sort of activity. Mm-hmm. So instead of just laying around, like I can lay around and watch TV, but I can't lay around and vacation very well. Mainly because I know that when I'm watching TV, I need to get through my normal list of television shows.
Yeah.
That's it. It's a work thing. I make television work, which is like, I need to get through Grey's Anatomy, The Resident. I need to get through Shonda Rhimes shows.
You watch all them shows too. You got a list.
I need to get through everything. Where I'm like, yeah, that's my normal version of relaxing. But in essence, it's still work to actually have to sit there and go through everything.
Right.
So, but I mean, to the original point, it's like we are a product of the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. You know, somebody was talking to me the other day about dating apps. And I was like, Tim and I have been together for 9 years. I missed that whole dating app boat.
Same. John and I are pre-dating apps. Yeah.
Within the last decade. Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem like a long time. I mean, but a decade is a long time.
Yeah,
that's a prepubescent kid at that point. You know what I mean? So where you're like, I always tell my friends, like, if something happened with me and Tim, I would not know what to do. Mm-hmm. Because listening to everybody else, I'm like,
you'd be by yourself. Yeah, right? I get
I'll be watching, I'll be laying on the couch watching TV all day.
Before we move on to the next topic, as you were saying this, you're like, that's a prepubescent kid. It's so funny. Do you think that kids nowadays, because they don't know, I feel like we're the last generation of people that knew stuff before all of social media.
You could have stopped at, we're the last generation that knew stuff.
Yes. Yes. 100%.
Touche, Drexel. But because of that, I mean, do you think that kids nowadays are not better off in the long run? Because this is what they're growing up with. This is normal to them. We saw the transition, from before social media, before all this urgency, before these famous quick schemes and all that stuff. We saw all of that.
I think we just process it differently. I think kids they might be hypersensitive, but they're also very intelligent because of the technology that they have. Like, we were flipping through Encyclopedia Britannicas, but they don't have to do that. They got all the information that they need, and they can process it as quick. They can process it more quick than we can. We look at it more analytically. Right. Like, okay, well, if that's the case, we know exactly what may or may not come next. They're like, well, we got to fix it. We got to move on. I mean, look at the Parkland kids. They were like, we don't have time. Right. If this is our generation, we'd have been like, well, let's think about it for like a half a second and make a decision and then move on. Yeah. And, these kids now, they're like, listen, we don't have time to wait for you.
Yeah, I think the only thing I think it is not good for them is how much fake news there is and how much fake information. Like, I think we analyze everything because we don't trust it. Right. They see something, there's an instant opinion. There's an instant perspective they take, or like, okay, now they will probably go down that rabbit trail and figure out that it's wrong. Some won't. Some will just say, oh, wow, that happened, and they just run with that. So I think that's the part that I appreciate about our generation, that we see something like, let me go further. Let me check this out, because I don't trust that. I haven't built my opinion up or my perspective or my foundation on that. I see what you're saying. And then you find out, oh, that's a fake page, or that person's whack, or whatever. So I think that's one thing I see with our kids is they just see something and are quick to take a stand on it. But like you mentioned, the Parkland kids, they follow through. So that's what I do like about this generation in terms of kids. Like, they do follow through. They do see I have more resources, and they will make the efforts to find out.
Yes, and I think that's some kids, because I think that there's a difference in the Parkland kids who are in the same generation as the Lori Loughlin and the Felicity Huffman kids, right? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So you can either, I want to get rich quick scheme, or you can make good and follow through on something that's really important. Right. And in this case, you got two different sets of kids who grew up in the exact same generation doing very different things. And
but it's not even just get rich; it's get famous.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I was using that as like a
Right.
they want it quick,
Yep.
and they don't want to have to work very hard for it,
Or at all.
or at all.
Yeah.
And they're going to figure out how, like I said, they're going to figure out how to make it work for them.
Right.
And they've got all of this different technology. I mean, it's like, it's like face tuning your life every day. And I love a good face tune. Okay, give me a little snitch.
Oh my God.
A little snip,
A little zhuzh, zhuzh.
a little zhuzh. And
Yeah,
I'm
but some
good.
people be face tuning to the point where if you got
Listen,
lost, no
smooth
one would
that
recognize
head
you.
out.
Yeah.
Smooth it out. Get those crow's feet. Smooth out that forehead.
Make that complexion
Make that
even.
complexion. Because listen, I'm just trying to get that blue check mark like everybody else. But if I don't get that, if I don't have a smooth head,
Oh my
what is that?
gosh.
What does it all say now for the trades of yesteryear? Because like I don't see kids wanting to be mechanics or like wanting to be like a veterinarian or wanting to be like things that aren't famous.
They don't even know what those are.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah,
how-
they
what
want to be a
happens to that
social media
now?
influencer. I want to be an Instagrammer.
they want to be able to pay people to do it.
Yeah,
They don't wanna do
If they're
it.
gonna pay some, who's gonna be doing that? Because no one wants to do that now. Those things
Right.
don't make any
Yeah.
sense. So
Robots. Eventually, that's what they're waiting for. They're
Don't
really
start,
hoping
because
that robots
I
are going.
Wow.
have a legitimate fear of this whole robot thing.
Right. I
Like,
mean,
I can't.
that's what they're waiting for, basically.
robot vets. That's
yeah.
I could see that robots. Yeah,
I mean, we
Changing
already
our
have
oil.
we have robot cooks already. Have you seen that that two-handed kitchen
I have
where you
not
give
seen
them the
that.
ingredients or tell them a recipe and they'll make it for you? You haven't seen that video? Yeah.
No, but I do need it.
Hey,
I need you to send me
That's
that
your
link.
birthday present,
Right, thanks.
Jackson.
I've been
The
waiting
too late birthday or your Christmas
for 2
present.
weeks for it.
wow.
Well, speaking of scary, this weekend, if you were hopefully not under a rock, you know that Us by Jordan Peele opened, and it opened, I guess, was $70 million opening. And it was the second biggest opening of 2019, and I think it was the second biggest opening of an original film after Avatar. Like an original screenplay and everything. So I love Jordan Peele. I love his mind. And Drexel and I both saw it. Karmel hasn't seen it. So we're not going to talk too much about the movie. But what we are going to talk about is because Jordan Peele, I don't know what he's been through in his life. I don't know where he gets these ideas from. I know Get Out, I think both of them came from like dreams that he had. I'm like, what are you having before you dream,
Right.
before you go to sleep? Because this is serious.
He's eating Taco Bell.
Philly cheesesteak.
Maybe
Right.
he's doing something. But Drexel and I were talking about, does a movie need to be explained in order for it to be a good movie? Because a lot of us, if you go see this film, it is going to go over your head. You are going to have to rethink pieces and articles to understand some of it. But I personally thought the film was brilliant. I think he's so smart. I think what he touches upon and the messages that he's trying to convey to his audiences are incredible and they need to be said. But if you're just watching it and not really thinking of it that way, you're going to leave the movie like, what did I just watch?
Yeah, I was just reading an article, and it's out there in the world, that Jordan Peele kind of said what his movie was about, that, at the end of the day, we are our own worst enemy. And I thought the movie was great, but I also, and I was telling Malynda this yesterday, is I go into movies personally not looking for a deeper meaning in something first. My first is it a good movie on the surface level? And then if I talk about it with somebody, then it becomes okay, what did I learn from that? And so with Us, there were things that I got from the jump where I was like, got it. It's still in the same formula as this, that, and the third movies that I've seen in the past, understand it. And now, but we also have the expectation, going back to the last conversation, about expectations about about all the analysis that we saw from Get Out. So now we're trying to put the same expectation on Get Out that we did on Us, instead of seeing them as two separate movies because of our expectation of Jordan Peele.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in this case, people were like, okay, so what? I didn't get what he was trying to say, so now I need it explained to me. But that does not make it a good movie.
Right.
You got to be able to separate, in my opinion, you got to be able to separate the two and then go back. It's like, is the Avengers on the surface level an entertaining movie? Are they entertaining movies? If you can say yes to that, because they are entertaining movies, that doesn't necessarily, entertaining also doesn't make them good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's a lot in art. Like when you look at a painting or being a comedian, I've always said this, if I have to explain a joke, it's probably not funny. But there's some things I've said that someone said, I didn't get it right away till later on. So sometimes, and I like that. There's something about that where you're thinking about the joke and it hits
Right.
you. You're like, oh, this is witty, man. So that joke kind of has a longer shelf life than other jokes. There's certain songs to this day. Someone explained to me what it meant. I'm like, oh, that I had no idea. That's what that song. The song still is good. Like I like the melody and I like what it's saying. Didn't know it had that extra third, fourth layer in it.
Yeah, like Side to Side by Ariana Grande. It took me months to figure it out.
Right.
Oh my god. But going on songs, like, just because it's catchy and it gets stuck in your head does not make it a good song.
Yeah, but I'm also not hip enough to understand songs like that.
Friday by Rebecca Black. Did that not get stuck in your head?
Of
Is it a good
course.
song? No.
But that was also during the MySpace era.
No,
Yeah.
it wasn't.
Was it?
No,
was
this
after.
was like a year ago. Not even. But I mean,
Maybe
like a
3 or
couple years
4,
ago. It
4
was
or
like
5
3 or 4
years
years ago.
ago. Yeah.
What?
Yes.
I'm about to Google it. I need to
Okay,
understand.
you're going to be
I don't
wrong.
know.
You're going to be
Here we go.
disappointed.
I'm about to, at my fingertips, but yeah, while I'm Googling.
While you're Googling, yes. So if a song is catchy, it doesn't necessarily make it a good song.
No, not at all. But I guess I'm saying is in that, and that again is our generation.
Yeah.
Where songs today are very, very surfacey.
Right.
There's like 3 or 4 lyrics, the hook, and a bad beat. The beats are dope. Love the beat.
Well,
but-
it's all about the producer now.
right.
Yeah.
Today is really more about the producer. Whether it's Metro Boomin, whether it's Mustard, whoever it is, it's all about the producer versus the actual
those
writer
people
or
that you
whatever.
just
Yeah,
named?
are those
They're
condiments?
producers.
No, see, I'm like,
I thought they were
producers,
just condiments.
see, I'm like, I'm in the music industry. I don't even know who you talking
You know what Metro
about.
Boomin is?
No, but that's not my kind of like
You
thing.
said somebody named Mustard?
Mustard, DJ Mustard.
Nope.
He says his name in every song.
That's DJ Khaled. I know
And
that
that's
one.
another
Cal-
thing. Like, are you that memorable if you have to keep reminding people who you are? Like, why you keep saying your name in the song? I can't stand it.
Yes. Yeah.
Beyonce says her name in several of her songs.
Does she?
Well, not several, but she said it.
I don't even listen to Beyonce like that.
Rebecca
so.
Black's
What do
Friday.
you listen?
What do I listen to?
Well,
I listen
I
to
listen to myself.
Malynda
She's
Hay.
like,
She's
to
like, I'm
myself.
gonna loop myself for a little bit.
Allow myself to introduce.
You know where I find music? I
myself.
find music on NPR. That's where I find new music because I like singer-songwriters because that's what I am. I don't listen to a lot of mainstream music.
Okay.
So I'm totally not, I don't know anything. I just listen to
Except
NPR
for
and I
Rebecca
love.
Black's Friday.
Right.
Well, but
Which
that
was
was
two-
that
that's
was
what
shoved
that's
down
a
my
reference.
throat.
That's right.
That was shoved down.
2011.
See,
That was a
8
long
years.
time ago.
That's not
That's
my
still not
MySpace,
MySpace.
though.
That's still not MySpace.
That was like right after MySpace.
It was still Facebook era because
Yeah,
that's when
yeah,
it went
yeah,
viral.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that was a long time ago.
It was.
was-
Dang, 8 years ago.
What is she doing now?
She was on The Four, and she tried to challenge this guy that was like amazing. We were like, boo boo, no.
Oh wow.
But she wasn't bad. She was all right. But yeah, she tried to make a comeback, and I guess it's just not happening.
But definitely go see Us because it is very good. Lupita is amazing. She's just very good, and the kids are great. And what's her husband's name?
It's the one from
Winston.
Black Panther. Yeah,
Yeah,
Winston
he's
Duke.
Winston
great.
Duke. Yeah.
But and then there's like, some like Elizabeth Moss is in it, and like
Yeah,
some
yeah.
fun folks. But it's just a fine movie.
And it's I think the most impressive part of it was the direction. I think it was beautifully shot.
Right.
I think how he directed it was great. The performances were good. But yeah, if there's a lot of layers to it, he threw entirely too much into the movie, to be honest.
And then like even the next day, even though we got the message, there were still some people call them. I didn't really think there were so much. Maybe they're plot holes, but they were just unanswered. Like, well, why did it happen like that?
Right.
And maybe that just needed to be explained. But I don't think that it needs to be explained for me to consider it a good movie.
I agree.
It's just like,
I agree.
just somebody tell me, please.
Right. I could see why people wanted it explained, but it didn't bother me, and I still took away from it what I think I was supposed to.
And if you want it explained, just Google it.
Right.
Go on Twitter.
Because we have our
'Cause
phones
we
at
got
our
phone at
fingertips.
You really want to know that bad? You better find it.
Is also is it him being black a thing? Because I mean, we had this with Tarantino for a while, where like a lot of his movies were kind of weird, kind of like off. But then we kind of just, it's Tarantino. He does his thing. It's like whatever. But like Jordan Peele, one, had success out the gate, and then now, are we saying, well, are we being overcritical because he's black? Not saying because he's black we're being critical, but is there something about that where like people are like,
I don't think so. I think people are being overcritical because he threw a lot into that damn movie. There was just so much,
Right.
and
And
you're
I
like,
also-
it's you know what I mean?
Right, and I think it's also because Get Out was so successful
Yeah.
that the expectation of that is, it's like if James Cameron came out with a film or any Clint Eastwood film where you're like,
Right.
if these directors don't have a good movie, that's
Right,
not
right.
that's a reflection on them. And
He
then
peaked with Get Out.
right,
Like, but I think he can still live up to it.
Right.
I mean, Us was good. It's not as good as Get Out. Get Out was a near perfect movie to me.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
But Us was still great. It was. And I can't wait to see what he comes up with next.
right. Well, Twilight Zone,
Oh, is that what he's
CBS
doing?
All Access.
But that's, I mean, like a feature film.
Oh well, but I mean, like it's his whole Twilight Zone. Like
Yeah,
he
I know
is,
he's redoing
he's
all
the
this.
host?
He's doing,
Oh,
yeah,
really?
he's doing all of it.
create,
Yeah.
he's the executive
he's doing all
producer.
that.
He's doing
Yeah.
everything.
Okay.
Yeah. But I like these think piece films that he's doing, like with so much, underlying messages. I want to see what he comes up with next for his horror. And that's it. It's not a horror film. That's the other thing. It was not a horror film. It was a psychological thriller.
Yeah, a lot of people, it
and to
came
me,
out
it was
like
very different.
categorized as such.
Yeah. And the trailer seemed like it was going to be a horror film, but it was not a horror film.
Maybe that's what maybe that's what Jordan Peele wanted us to think. All right. Maybe that was the
Interesting.
underlying message is, you stupid people.
That's what he's saying.
Who drops a horror film in the
Oh
spring?
my gosh.
Right.
Well, I can't wait to see what happens next. And I guess I'll watch The Twilight Zone. I've never been a fan of The Twilight Zone, so we'll see.
Well, if you watch the show, you gotta watch the trailers on like YouTube and stuff like that because they are. First of all, every actor is attached to it.
Signed on.
Really?
It's like watching a seasons of The West Wing where you're like, oh, that person's in it, that
that's
person's in
funny.
it, that's it. Like everybody's doing it right now.
Okay, I'm excited.
Cool. All right. So next, we're going to talk about the longest list of candidates I feel like I have ever seen in my
Ever.
lifetime that are running in the Democratic Party. And this is all Drexel's MO. This is what he does. This is what his life is. But these people are wearing me out. They're wearing me out.
Help us,
I can't.
Drexel,
I can't
please.
keep track. I
Please.
cannot keep track.
What do you want to know?
What?
Well,
like,
why are there so many people running?
Yes.
Because everybody wants to help. everybody's trying to figure out. It's one of those things where every politician, first of all, it takes a level of narcissism to want to be a politician.
For sure.
Because you believe that you can help better than your candidate.
Are you
right?
speaking from experience,
Listen,
Drexel?
I'm just
Right.
saying. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying. But at the same time, in the back of people's head, they also believe that once they reach a certain level, that they can also be president.
Right.
And so with the Democrats, we are in a really interesting situation where, on the heels of Barack Obama, the Democratic Party is trying to continue that momentum of being different.
Right.
And in this case, that's how we ended up with Hillary Clinton as the nominee, and to her detriment, in my opinion, picking Tim Kaine was a mistake if you're going to continue to move forward. Like vice presidential candidates or running mates should be an extension of what's next.
Correct.
And in this case, I never saw Tim Kaine as the next in line to be president.
Well, no one even knew who he was.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's on armed services. He was a successful senator. He is a successful senator in Virginia. Hillary Clinton, was looking at a world of governing first and not what was next. And that was a criticism of Barack Obama during his whole presidency in terms of the party, which was, why are you not doing enough to build the party for the future as opposed to what is right now? And Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton come from that same school of thought of governing first and not thinking about what's next second. And I think you got to be able to do both. We got to think about the future in the present and not just on policy. Because there's going to be a bunch of people that's going to be looking at policy like that, and that's going to be the job of all the aides and all of the White House staff and congressional leaders and stuff like that, is to try to figure that piece out. But as the leader of the party, the president is de facto leader of the party,
Right.
for all intents and purposes. And in that case, you always have to be looking at what is next. And I think a lot of these candidates are thinking that they're going to be what's next. We've got almost 20 candidates right now. We're still waiting to hear from a couple other people. But I mean, if you look at the list, it's like half women, half men, and a speckle of color here and there.
A speckle.
A speckle. Okay.
I say a speckle because all of these white guys keep jumping in, and then it just keeps getting more and more of them.
Which I'm probably gonna be the minority in saying this, but I personally think that in order to beat Trump and to move on from this hell that we have been in, it needs to be a white male. Because I don't think that if there is a white male that they can say as much as they've been saying, and by they I mean the Republican Party. Because what are you gonna say? What are you gonna like? What are you really gonna fight against? You know, if you are talking to yourself, you know what I'm saying?
Sure, I think that there is a way to energize a base without being a white guy, like Joe Biden. Like I love Joe Biden.
Totally.
Like
who doesn't?
I mean, listen. If this is 2016, Joe was my guy.
Yeah.
If he had jumped in, there would have been. I didn't have to go through the debates. I wouldn't even have to get through the primary. I'd have been
It
like,
just
"There's
would've been
Joe."
Joe.
It'd have been Joe Biden. That would have been it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I personally think that time has passed, but I'm also not counting him out.
Right.
Because the problem with Joe Biden is that he's trying too hard to make concessions. Like I'll promise to do one term. He hasn't said that yet, but that's what his team is mulling right now. Or I'm going to promise to pick a female or a minority, and those questions come up, you know, in terms of what's next. And instead of just being like, I'm the guy that's going to beat this guy. Like that's it. Just say that, move on. That's what people know.
Right.
Because the other part of what Trump supporters love about Donald Trump is that he wants to win.
Yeah.
Democrats do not just want to win. We've got to get to the point where we're just like, we got to win first.
Yeah.
Let's win. Let's move on, and then we can govern.
Right.
Instead of let's figure it out and let's move on. Like that's the problem. Like people gravitate towards success when they are not themselves successful.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you are dicking around trying to figure out whether or not you're going to win or not, they're over there being like, well, let's find the person who thinks he's going to win. And that's going to be the guy who's going to beat Donald Trump.
Right.
Or the female that's going to beat Donald Trump.
So so you said that everyone wants to help. So with this many candidates out here, who's really going to help? Like who is of all the ones that are out there are really going to do something, one that is substantial enough to defeat Trump, and two that really helps us?
Sure. I think the good thing about having this many candidates is that everybody's going to be talking about policy in a way that we really haven't seen before. Barack Obama did it a little bit. Hillary Clinton put out policy papers, but it wasn't explained well enough. Like she was too much of a policy wonk. And I'm not. Listen, I love Hillary Clinton. I voted for her. You know, whatever. But people, again, in this age where everything is at our fingertips, we want instant information. Tell us exactly what you're going to do. And CNN is actually doing a really good job of letting the Democratic candidates do these town halls because it's an opportunity for candidates to speak directly to questions early enough to where they can start setting their own policy positions. I think the only person who does not really have policy positions yet is still a rock star is Beto O'Rourke, who has not put out a single policy. And I don't even know that Beto put out many policies when he was running in Texas at all either. He was just a fiery candidate.
His personality.
His personality, and that's fine. But that doesn't make you a good president.
Right.
You know,
Do you think it'd make him a good vice president?
I think it would. I think that we would have been better served if he would run against John Cornyn in Texas. But yeah, I think he'd make a good vice president in terms of, because then he can learn on the job. Vice president is very just ceremonial, and even in the Constitution, it's a little bit like that.
Yeah.
But and he can just send him around the country. Seriously, send him around the country. You stay in Washington, send him around the country, let him fire people up, let him talk about the policy, and do that. If you're not thinking, if you want to be a good governor, and by governor I mean president, like, you know, somebody who governs. Yeah. And you're not thinking about, well, if I send this person out, are they going to be more popular than me? Which is what presidents don't want their vice presidents to be, as more popular than they are. But in this case, you got to be able to send somebody out who can talk about the policy that's going to connect to people in that ways. And there are candidates that can do that. Cory Booker can do that. Pete Buttigieg can do that. I'm trying just looking down this list. Julian Castro can do that as well, but he also should have been Hillary Clinton's vice presidential candidate too. So there are people who have that opportunity to be that person to go around the country to do that. Stacey Abrams can do that, but that doesn't make them presidents.
Right.
We again expect somebody who can fire us up, but do you want a boss who can lead you, or do you want a boss who can fire you up? Do you want the fun boss, or do you want the boss who's going to make you successful?
Right.
So with that being said, the opponent fires his team up like 100%. No other. So do we have to meet? So do we have to play fire with? Do we have to play a fire with fire? If we come with someone that's, as you're saying, is that actually counterproductive, because it's only going to make Trump see, okay, well, this person's not going to even match me in the vigor that I'm going to bring. So what's the point? Like we and also re-splintering the Dems so much that we're not going to get that person.
No, I think that there are. I think what it sucks, because like when Hillary Clinton was running, the most screen time she got was when she shot something back at Trump, or where she said something like, in the debates was like, you're the puppet, like that kind of stuff, instead of like what she was actually saying out there, the mounds of policy and her plans that she had.
Well, that's what people want to see, sadly.
Right, and that's the unfortunate. So yeah, I think let the VP do that. Let that person go after Mike Pence on that, because I think that there does have to be a contrast to Donald Trump in terms of having a grown-up in the room, but not a grown-up that people can't connect with.
Right.
So that's going to be the challenge for a lot of these candidates: is you be better, but you don't talk over people. You talk to people.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump is talking to people, even though he's not saying anything.
At all.
At all. He's really not saying. If you watch any of his rallies, he never says anything.
Yeah.
The stories, he is anecdotal. He is story time. He is saying things that are wild. He is never.
Well, because he struggles with the English language.
But he's consistent.
Right, consistent in that. I'm saying, if you go to, again, if you watch those Trump rallies, you're like, Barack Obama used to do these rallies or most presidents, actually all the presidents, go around the country and they talk about their policies that they're willing to promote. If you go to any Trump supporter, you're like, well, what has he done? People are like, well, the economy's great. Well, not because of the tax cuts.
Yeah, right.
Because if you look at the reality is, economic policy like that doesn't take effect for another like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
we're only in a year later after those tax cuts went into effect. We are seeing people's tax returns not come back in the way that they want them to. So is that a positive? But at the same time, the reality is that either you got your money up front or you got your money later.
Right.
So that just was not explained to people. Now people are upset. They're like, oh, these tax cuts are great because I got the money when I wanted it. But you can't have the money when you want it and then money later, because that's not what you're going to get. And we got to do a better job of explaining that Schoolhouse Rock. I always say Democrats need to be Democratic Party.
I'm just a bill and all that stuff.
Yeah. We need to be over these next few months pushing out ads like their Schoolhouse Rock. And I think that's the only way to educate people and to get people like, oh, okay, so that's really how it works. Because at the end of the day, like that's just surface level. And then we look at Senate rules that really stop things from happening. The rules of the Senate and the rules of the House are not written to where people, I mean, you can Google it or whatever, but they're not written where people know. And they're like, well, why does it take 60 votes? Okay, what is reconciliation? Okay, well, why can what is a blue slip? Why can a senator not pull the nomination of a judge from their home state? Cory Booker said it the other day on Pod Saves America, where he was talking about there was a judge in New Jersey where they didn't even get to, the 2 New Jersey senators didn't even get to interview that guy. Really? Because the Justice Department, the White House was like, nope, can't do it. And then he got confirmed anyway. But it used to be where senators could pull a blue slip and say, nope, that's not going to happen. in their own home state. And then Mitch McConnell was like, yeah, we're taking that away because we want to confirm all the judges. Because at the end of the day, Republicans want to win. That is their tactic. That is their MO. That is all. And we can either go that route or we're always going to be behind them.
So you think it's crippling us, obviously?
I think that it does have a crippling effect because right now, I mean, this is probably why Bernie Sanders is as popular as he is, because he is pushing a sense of urgency with, but not, in my opinion, managing the expectation on the other side. Because what happens is, if you're telling people that this is what we're going to do, and then they don't understand why it's not going to happen, it's not going to be beneficial down the road. And that was always my criticism of Bernie Sanders. Sure, let's talk about Medicare for all. But let's also tell people that it's also very difficult to get that passed. Not where the money's coming from.
Right.
Nobody wants to hear that you don't have the money. We know we have the money. We cut the defense bills, we cut the defense spending, all that stuff. But it's, can you get enough Senate votes? Okay, so then if you can't get enough Senate votes, then where should the focus be? On finding great candidates who can lead at the end of the day, who can get elected. So the Republicans did that. They laid the groundwork for that in terms of gerrymandering, in terms of finding candidates and pushing those candidates. I mean, we've got Ron DeSantis down as the governor of Florida, who should not be the governor of Florida.
He should not be the governor of Florida at all.
So they
So did you like Andrew Gillum then?
I loved Andrew Gillum. I thought he was great.
Too. Yeah.
But they laid the groundwork for that, and over years, and Mitch McConnell is still doing that. Because at the end of the day, he wants to retain power, no matter what, which is why you don't hear him talk much, because he's trying to retain that power. He's behind the scenes. He's not worried about anybody else but his party. So I do think that we've got to figure out how to either counter that or explain to people why that is bad, and we don't do a very good job of that.
So is there a huge gap? Because a lot of things you've mentioned, I'm sure a lot of people don't even know the names you're mentioning. So I know
true.
No, it's very true.
That's why I brought it up.
Right.
And I think people will probably listen to this podcast and be like, okay, who is that? Who's that? And hopefully you guys are Googling this as we're mentioning these people. So, because you mentioned a cool thing about Schoolhouse Rock, and I almost feel like Trump is Schoolhouse Rock for his people. Like he makes things very simple for them to understand. It's not policy,
right?
But he's saying some simple things. People get excited, and it's bolstering his persona. He gets hyped up. I mean, honestly, I feel like a Democratic candidate needs to go that same route. Maybe not the same offensive way he does, but go to Twitter, go to Instagram. If it's the policies you're talking about, make him a minute video on Instagram and put that person's voice or face over that infographic or whatever it may be, because I think that's the way people will start to understand policy and start to understand candidates in Senate and House and all this stuff. I can tell you right now, there's so many people who do not understand politics, and a lot of this is optics, is how it looks. So there has to be a way to bring the people into closer view of what's actually going on. They're not going to get everything. They're not going to understand everything. When you said no one knows what that means. So it's like, how can people understand a little bit more enough to vote for the right candidate? Because they're not going to get deep into it, but they need to understand, okay, here's the person you need to vote for. And whether that's starting in their own their city, school board, stuff like that, and then moving more out towards, more statewide and federal-wide politics. Somehow or another, there needs to be a way to bridge that gap for people to understand.
For sure. And the problem also is that no one's actually going to take the time to read the policies that are posted on these candidates' websites. No one's just going to do it. No one's going to read these 60-page PDFs. Who has time to do that? Second of all, I just want to be able to see a one sheet that tells me everything that is simple and easy. I'll be like, oh, okay, I'm for that. I'm for that. I don't like that. I'm for that. Okay, cool.
Give me a menu.
You know what I mean?
I want a menu.
I want a menu. I want a menu. I want a political menu. Right. Oh, that could be a good little topic too, or a show or something you should do, Drexel. There. Look,
what's on the menu?
What's on the menu? Yeah.
I think the problem with that right now, and I get that, is that everybody most Democrats basically are saying the same things right now. So you won't be able to decipher who is better at that without looking at past votes, records, and that again takes time to do that. So you can because they're all going to talk about some form of healthcare that is universal or single payer or Medicare and what that means to them. They're all going to talk about climate change. They're all going to talk about veterans. They're all going to talk about education,
Right.
In the way that they're all the same. They're all going to talk about free college tuition, because that's what they know that everybody wants to hear right now. So everybody right now is going to be saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So even to look at a menu, you're going to be like, well, they're all carbon copies right now, without saying, okay, well, what is Elizabeth Warren? Elizabeth Warren, I read it the other day. She put out a whole housing policy, or her whole position on housing, and it's very good. And you're like, okay, well, all that makes a whole lot of sense. But you got to take the time to read it. But the other problem is that Pete Buttigieg had a really great week last week, where he was everywhere.
Yeah.
And everybody knew his name, and he came out of nowhere. But you also got candidates like Amy Klobuchar, who's been in the Senate for years from Minnesota.
See, I don't even know who that is.
Exactly.
I heard her.
You've also got Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii, who not my favorite, but I'm bringing her up because you've got candidates out there who people just don't know. Julian Castro was Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, San Antonio Mayor.
Right.
He's a great candidate.
So when do you think this will dwindle down?
Because
So,
we have obviously Iowa and New Hampshire come first. They're going to get through the debates. So the threshold that the DNC has set for candidates is if you have 65,000 unique individual donors, you will have the opportunity to make the debate stage.
Gotcha.
Not everybody can make the debate stage. And I think what Tom Perez and the DNC are going to try to do is basically pick names out of a hat. And that's who makes the debate stage, no matter if you're a top tier candidate or or at the bottom of the barrel. So it could be Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris on the same stage as Jay Inslee and John Hickenlooper and Pete Buttigieg, and that's the stage, right? It could be any of those names.
What's the max for people?
Well, we remember Republicans had 12 on a stage last year,
which was
even
entirely
though it took Ben Carson a couple of minutes to figure out how to walk onto the stage, and then Donald Trump was with him, and but. You could have as many as you want to. I think it's just a matter of how they spread those debates out and who they give opportunity to. And I actually like the idea of drawing names out of the hat because it makes it fair. Again, I just named Jay Inslee. Probably nobody could be like, well, I don't know where Jay Inslee's from.
Nope.
And same thing with John Hickenlooper. He's from Colorado. Jay Inslee's from Washington State. They're both governors.
Okay.
So those are the people that we while they're great, Jay Inslee's going to really focus on climate change, and he's come out the jump, and that's what he said he's going to be focused on. And Colorado's a fairly liberal state, and Governor Hickenlooper is very popular. I had some clients that worked the other day. They're from Colorado. They were like, "We love Governor Hickenlooper."
Yeah.
But does that make them a great president? And can they? And I said this about Pete Buttigieg the other day, and I said he would be great. He'll be a great candidate if he can break out of the noise. And like I said, even though he had a great week last week, can he surpass the popularity of Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren?
Right.
So
or even though you don't like him, Bernie. I mean, he's still popular.
Sure. And I'm really talking about Democrats right now. Listen.
But he's popular and people are
sure.
Saying, yeah.
Trump is also popular, but that's the reality.
Yeah,
is you can be the loudest. This is what really confuses people in politics. They're like, well, how can somebody be so popular and still not get that many votes?
Right.
And just because you're loud doesn't make you right.
Right.
And in this case, Trump is loud and his base is loud. And they're still, Republicans are the minority in this country, vote-wise, the minority. And they can still be loud. And so I said as I go into this primary that I'm going to talk about candidates that I would like to see win, but not disparage candidates that other people may or may not like.
Right.
So I'm going to be talking about Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren. Kirsten Gillibrand, I love. One of my best friends loves her too, from New York. And so those are the candidates that I think that we should be watching out for. And then we'll see where the other VP candidates come from. And, but there's also other candidates that nobody knows either, like Andrew Yang.
Nope.
Andrew Yang is out there talking about,
That's the
he's
first
from
time
New
I
York
heard
as
that
well.
name.
He's from New York. He's out there talking about, what is that? I want to say it's like income. Hold on. I'm going to Google it real quick. Because
Well, while you're Googling, Karmel, if you had to vote tomorrow, who would have your vote? You wouldn't vote?
No. Politics just bothers me altogether.
Why wouldn't they?
I don't understand, because so much of it to me seems almost manufactured. Like, I almost feel like a lot of this is just a distraction. Like, there's so much stuff that's talked about, and I watch the news, I'm up, and I'm like, none of it makes, for example, let's go back to the election itself. How Russia somehow or another influenced the vote. You're going to tell me that we don't know if a whole country tapped into our system to find... If we're watching the Olympics, they get points, judges, right then. They know what's happening. Mm-hmm. There's no way we don't know if Russia affected our votes. There's no... The whole thing about Hillary losing 35... I still have emails on Gmail that I've deleted. I can find emails. There's no way the U.S. government lost emails. So this stuff doesn't make sense to me. It just gets to the point where I'm like, okay, are they just making stuff up to do something else? Like, something else is going on that they're hiding, so let me do this. And I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but I'm also smart. I just know, I know how computers work. And I know someone can't just tap into a system and us not know about it. Like, things aren't just... We're not losing stuff like that.
Right.
To go back to Andrew Yang real quick, universal basic income is what Andrew Yang is talking about. And people talk about it all the time, about the government providing a basic income for Americans to help them get started. And so that is something that that Andrew Yang is going to be talking about. And he may or may not be on that debate stage. He's just a businessman.
Yeah.
And then, Cory Booker was on, like I said, he was talking about giving kids from birth almost like a bond to help them financially, to help them start out.
Right.
You give kids, as soon as they're born, a bond, and then that grows over time. And then by the time they're adults, they have some sort of thing. I mean, it's kind of like Social Security, but like not really. But in this case, it's yours. You're not having to think of what it's doing, and is that going to grow? And then Marianne Williamson is also out there, if you are an Oprah fan.
She's running?
She is running for
Really?
president, yeah. And
wow,
yeah,
I did not know that. I mean, I know who she is, but I did not know that. Okay,
I'm sure if there are Marianne Williamson fans listening, they'll be like, "I can't believe you just said Marianne Williamson in the list." But yeah, I have friends who like Marianne, and she's out there and in more ways than one, and I kid, but people love that kind of stuff. When it comes to Russia, it's not that, and the Department of Homeland Security has definitely said that they knew what was happening. It's a matter of public knowledge about how you don't let it affect what's happening at the current time, which is why James Comey got wrapped up in the thing. Like, you sit on information until it's absolutely necessary. James Comey obviously should have sat on the information that he had without influencing the election as close, because the DOJ's policy is that the FBI cannot influence an election, whether or not within a certain amount of days. And that's what ended up happening. I think when it comes to national security issues, obviously the government knows a shit ton more than we do, and they're going to sit on that information unless it is information that the public is in a need to know situation. Like, we get like the tornado watches and all that stuff kind of. But when it comes to like, are we being tapped into? Well, we know that. Is Russia sending out ads on Facebook? Are they buying all these things? Of course they are. Because they want to influence that, because they all have a stake in our president.
Right.
Who's the leader.
Right.
And it's not that we didn't know. It's just that we were like, sure. Okay. And we did nothing about it.
That's what I think it is.
It's indifference.
The public, and as you said, needs to know what they need to know. And so the government determines what we need to know. So that influences the way people move, the way the economy, the way they vote. It influences everything with the public.
But that is because we have elected them to do that. Because we as voters,
Some of them.
What I mean to say is
Some of them
the
we've
leaders, the elected officials. That's what I mean, is that we've put trust in them that they are going to let us know what we need to know, and then they appoint people who help them get that information out if necessary. But we have put our trust in our Constitution enough to say, this is what we're going to do. This is who we're going to trust. And that's how it happens every 4 years or every 6 years or every 2 years, whether in the House, the Senate, or President, right? So that's the reality, is that is how our democracy works, whether or not you're here in America or you're in Ireland and you got the MPs over there, or you're dealing with Brexit in London. We have entrusted these people to make those decisions for us. You know, I had a staff meeting yesterday and we had the full staff, and I remember saying to them, I said, you know, it is our job to get you the information that you need. Again, we are telling you what you need to know, and we are, as the leadership, determining what that is. So how, as bosses, can we expect our elected leaders not to do the exact same thing? Because that's what they are. We have been entrusted to do that, and in turn, the same thing. They are our leaders for a reason. I mean, we might not be voted in as leaders of our businesses and stuff like that, but at the same time, people trust us to make those decisions for them and to get them the information. And I think that a lot of these candidates are going to have to prove that they can filter and tell us exactly what we need to know at the same time. And I think that's why Donald Trump is so good at what he does, because he might not be saying anything. He really says nothing.
Yeah, he's smart.
You know, you can talk about John McCain, and that makes the news for a week.
A
week.
Yeah.
After out of all the other shit that he was saying through that whole thing, and the only thing that came out of that policy wise was an executive order on college.
Their First Amendment rights.
Where you're like, but that's in the Constitution,
Right.
You don't need an executive order
But
for
he
that.
wants to be the one to say that he did it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But no, you
It's
didn't.
ego. It's
but
ego.
you didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't. You know, so and people are dumb enough to be like, but he did.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so
Absolutely.
you know, and to break through the noise, you know, and so that's the problem. And you know, when it comes down to, like, you know, things that happen with emails and all that stuff, I mean, obviously we know there are technological ways that either you can preserve them or not on private servers. I don't know how it works, but you know, it's not a WhatsApp like Jared Kushner, where he's screenshotting shit.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that's a national security issue right there.
That's just stupid.
You know,
Does he
but
really
like,
not know that?
of course they know that, but they don't care.
They don't care.
That's what I'm saying.
Because they don't
That's
think
what
anything's
I'm
gonna,
saying.
because they're invincible. Nothing's gonna happen to them.
Right.
And
They're
that's been
invincible
proven.
because they have a base that does not care.
They don't care.
And it's
Because honestly, what could really happen? Because nothing can happen to them. Like we're not.
I mean, they can't. They can't. I mean, if
we're not going to do anything.
If it's criminal, you know, then of course they can. And I
But
think,
even that, if it's criminal, what's going to happen? Are they really going to do time? No.
I think that obviously, like, you know, like the 13 indictments that came down from Robert Mueller. Yeah, of course they're going to do some time, but it just depends on the person.
Is it Martha Stewart time, or is it like a real time?
Oh, it's definitely going to be Martha Stewart time.
Yes, I mean,
It's 100%
Absolutely
Martha
Martha
Stewart
Stewart
It's just
time.
nothing.
But speaking of Robert Mueller, the report came out, and I'm reading this headline, and it says that Robert Mueller found that the Trump campaign did not conspire with Russia, according to the Attorney General. Attorney General Bill Barr submitted a letter to Congress on Sunday summarizing the special counsel's principal conclusions. Special counsel Robert Mueller found that neither the Trump campaign nor anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 presidential election.
What was
Surprise.
That from? What was that from?
Why?
I just want to know the source.
Oh, this is on BuzzFeed News.
Okay, so actually,
Is there something different? Because there's
well,
I have the CNN. I
think,
just did the first one, New York Times. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that the principal findings, from what I was reading, actually Bill Barr's thing, it was still a little convoluted. It was like the report did not conclude that Trump obstructed justice, but it also didn't exonerate him.
Right.
And
exactly.
that,
well, if you would have let me keep reading.
what I mean to say, what I mean to
time.
say is that it's hard to find evidence of collusion in that way, and I think that's what the special counsel said. We don't have enough evidence to support that part of it.
Okay.
Not that it didn't happen. It's just very difficult to, okay, you had a phone call. Well, what is that phone call? Okay, well, but how do you, like, somebody could say they did and somebody could say they didn't. Without hard evidence, how do you prove that? And I think prosecutors obviously are in the position where they have to prove things beyond a reasonable doubt. And in this case, as Nancy Pelosi said a couple of weeks ago about when she was talking about impeachment, and she was like, I'm not really for impeachment unless there's hard evidence that there is something absolutely wrong. And that should have been the position from Democrats from day one on Russia. That does not mean, to me, and we'll talk more about Mueller in a second, it does not mean that there have not been impeachable offenses that have happened outside of the Russia investigation. We have over the last couple of years let the Russia investigation take precedent over policy that has the effect to destroy the country. Judges that have been confirmed that are just the worst, and everything else that Donald Trump has done from the emoluments clause and things like that he has not separated himself from his businesses. We've spent $91 million to fly him back and forth in 2 years just down to Mar-a-Lago. Like, those things could be more impeachable than us focusing on a Russia investigation. But the other part of that is people are like, why don't you, if Democrats had focused, I won't even say Democrats, because again, there were only a handful of Democrats that were talking impeachment. It was not the Democratic Party talking about impeachment. Democrats' position has always been, let's wait till the report comes out and then we can figure out what to go to from there. In this case, Democrats are trying to figure out what the raw intelligence is right now. And they want to read the whole thing, because if there are little things in there that are impeachable, then they're going to find out.
For sure.
But the principal findings are just like a summary.
Yeah.
That's not, and this is a good look for the White House right now, because it's just very blanket.
Right. And it's enough for his supporters,
It's enough for everybody to say. And the Attorney General has an obligation to the Constitution first, the American people first, and also the White House. They're an appointee of the president. They serve at the pleasure of the president. They're cabinet officials. And so if you don't think William Barr is trying to protect the president and the White House at the same time as trying to protect the American people, that's a tough line to be on. And that's what he's going to do.
I mean, he's quoted saying, like you said, while this report does not conclude the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him.
Right. And I think that's what Democrats are going to try to latch on to. And then, but the other part is the Republicans are going to latch on to didn't commit a crime, but the other part is didn't exonerate him. So it's a matter of what people really want to see over the next.
So we're still divided.
So right now, so somebody said on Twitter, so we're back at square one.
Yeah.
So let me say this. So we were waiting to find out if this report was going to tell us if Trump, I'm just making this really as basic as possible, Trump and the Russians somehow or another helped him get elected. Is that what we're saying? That this report
That's what that report was supposed to find, right?
No, the report was supposed to find whether or not the Trump campaign worked with Russia, because we know that Russia influenced the election in multiple ways. We know that part of it. Whether or not the campaign themselves helped aid in that,
or if they were acting on their own,
and if Russia was acting on their own.
Gotcha.
The president just, of course, tweeted complete and total exoneration. Which, if you read the report, is not what it said.
But that's going to be enough for his supporters.
All they need.
That's all they need to see and read, and now he's going to get reelected. And I don't know that. I'm like sweating.
Right.
See, that's what I'm saying. A lot of this it's drama. It's like it's very. And yeah, we're still divided. Yeah, like you just said, it's very diverse. It's very like, look at this. Well, I'm doing this to me. It's like, this is happening over here. Look at this. But this is what's really going on. So we're not really paying attention to things that really can affect us. To me, a lot of this, I'm going to wake up tomorrow. It won't be any different. Like most of the people who are listening to this or just watching TV or whatever, it's not going to affect them at all. Like they have nothing to worry about in terms of that this happened. Because, okay, so if Trump had nothing to do with it, you mean to tell me somehow or another Russia was just like, we're going to get Trump elected and Trump had no clue? Like nothing?
I think that there is...
Like logic, as a normal human being.
I think you can do that. I think there is always a way where countries really want somebody and they will do whatever they can to make it happen.
But that Trump did not know that.
I think that Trump is too stupid
Well, okay, so
to
let me say
know
yeah,
to be a
yeah,
part of that.
Okay, honestly,
there might
though,
be people around him.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So honestly, Trump is a figurehead. We get that. So when we say Trump, we're talking about
The world,
everything that
the
comes
Trump
with
world,
it. Right. So it's not just him. We
Trump
know
is an institution.
he's an institution. There's people around him that are part of Trump when we say Trump. So they knew. I mean, let's just be honest. Someone knew this was going to happen.
Right.
Whether or not you can
Well, you
prove
got,
it or not.
You've got Roger Stone. You've got when you in terms of just the WikiLeaks debacle in general, you know that the sons knew about it.
Yes.
Not Eric. Eric was like, I don't want anything to do with that. But Don Jr. definitely was definitely knew what was coming. They knew that people were trying to influence it to hurt Hillary Clinton. That does it's knowing does not mean you, and I think this is what the report is basically saying, having knowledge that things were nefarious does not mean that you personally did anything.
So, okay, I get this. Let me make a analogy. If this is the Olympics, every 4 years as well.
We know Russia always cheats. In the
Okay, right? So let's say that. So we know a Russian judge scores someone a bit higher than everyone else. That person doesn't get a medal. Whether they knew it or not, we take the medal away. That's right then. We don't have to wait 6 months for some report. We don't have to wait, that this person looked and then all this. They know right away. Mm-hmm. Why does this take so long? And like, why is he in office if we know Russia influenced the vote?
Well,
like, why are we waiting for this?
There's no precedent for a redo of an election. I don't think the Constitution allows that. I think the way that the system is built, it does not allow that. Like, because I think Democrats were like, let's just move on from that, because there were people at the beginning being like, I think we should be redoing this whole thing over again. But at the same time, it would have destroyed the country. You want to talk about civil war? Like, if this report had come out and Democrats had moved on impeachment and it had been in what we thought it was going to be, Democrats would have moved so swiftly. On next week would have just been all about impeachment, right?
Yeah,
or anything like that. And I think now we're at a point where we're like, where Trump supporters are like, well, we knew he did something. Like, they would have been like, well, we knew that was coming.
Right.
So they didn't care. But we could not go back and redo an election.
So here's the thing. There's been precedent before where something happened that was an absolute catastrophe that brought in policy, 9/11. Now, whether that was a causation with someone or it just happened, we had huge policy changes because of that. Mm-hmm. So my point is, if you want something to change that seems impossible to change, you have a catastrophe.
Sure. So Democrats have brought up legislation, H.R. 1, for example, in the House. It was their first bill that they put on the floor, which talked about election integrity and bringing all and really focusing on how to not let 2016 happen again. H.R. 1 had a lot more going on in it, but part of that was election integrity. Mitch McConnell's not bringing that up because, again, he wants to win.
Right.
He don't want anything that's going to keep him from maintaining his Senate majority. So it's less about when 9/11 happened, everybody was on board. Everybody's on the same page. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew that something needed to happen. Republicans know that something needs to happen. There's only one person that can stop a bill from hitting the Senate floor, and that is Mitch McConnell. And he has actively said that he is not bringing up legislation that is anywhere near that. It took the House, it was like 425-0 the other day on whether or not they wanted the Mueller report public. The House to get 425 House members to vote together, and is crazy. Wow. Republicans and Democrats.
Wow.
Lindsey Graham in the Senate, they were going to bring it up in the Senate because to get to the president's desk, you got to go to the House, you got to go to the Senate, you got to go back to conference, then you got to get to the White House. Lindsey Graham shot that bill down in the Senate and was like, nope, we're not bringing that up. That's got dead in the Senate. That means it'll never see the light of day after that. So that is the system that you're working
Right.
in. And that is why you don't get the policy or anything like that that we expect to happen, because you have singular senators who are shooting those down. And whether or not it's Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, to save the president. You know, the only thing, Trump had a veto the other day. His first veto, I can't even remember what it was on. I want to say sanctions or something like that.
I gave up Trump for Lent,
But-
so I literally
right.
have no idea what's going on with him.
But, you know, it was something that everybody ended up agreeing on, and that's what ended up happening.
Right.
And so I think that is the simple way of explaining why things aren't moving as fast as they are, because, you know, it takes 60 votes in the Senate to move major legislation, unless it's within reconciliation. Google it if you don't know what that is. And or a single senator can filibuster or kill a bill. And that's exactly what Republicans do all the time.
So before we come to the end of the show, what do you expect to happen next with all this?
The other part of that, so there's the federal investigation, and then the Southern District of New York has its own set of criminal investigations they're dealing with right now.
Okay.
The Southern District of New York, for those that don't know, is probably one of the most, if not the most powerful prosecutorial sections of the country. It's where all the major cases really go through in terms of, on the East Coast, in terms of prosecution. If you watch the show For the People, Shonda Rhimes' show, it is all about the Southern District of New York and how powerful they are. One thing that people may or may not know is that the Southern District of New York and any of those states' attorneys report to the Justice Department, report to the Attorney General, in turn report to the President of the United States. They are appointees of the Justice Department, in turn appointees of the White House. That does not mean that they will not do their job. It just means that if you look at the line, at the end of the day, they will always report to the White House, and the Attorney General can dismiss a state's attorney at any time. Or district, or any of those, not a district attorney because they're from the city, but any federal attorney, any U.S. attorney, the U.S. Attorney's Office, not state's attorney, the U.S. attorney. So in that case, Southern District of New York is going to do their job. If they find that there was criminal activity that was happening in New York, great, and that's what's happening next in terms of that, because Trump can't touch anybody that a state has charged. He cannot pardon anybody that a state has charged, and the only person that can do that is a governor. And in this case, Andrew Cuomo's not. He's not about that life.
Yeah.
The other part of that is Democrats are going to continue their investigations in certain things, but I think they're right now, with the information that we have, they're going to have to tread carefully, because they also don't want to hurt our 2020 candidates.
Absolutely.
And they don't want to make that the narrative. Trump now will use this narrative as often. He walked out on the White House lawn the other day. The press was out there, didn't even say hello. The first things out of his mouth: no collusion, no collusion. That's what he said. Didn't he say anything else?
That's going to be his campaign.
That will be the
next
next
campaign.
year and a half of
hat.
campaigning.
Yeah.
Of Democrats wasted, not Democrats, because the crazy thing
He's
about
gonna blame it on
the
the
crazy thing
Democrats.
about the whole thing is that his Justice Department appointed the special counsel. The special counsel, Robert Mueller, for all of his work, is a Republican. Rod Rosenstein is a Republican. James Comey was a Republican. All these people were Republicans, and this is where the investigation happened. So to blame it on Democrats is just because Democrats are talking about it.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. We just talk too damn much.
Evidently. Yeah.
Maybe if we just let it happen.
But that's the thing with his supporters. They don't know that this is all the Republicans are actually doing the investigation.
They don't care.
They hear Trump saying that it's
It's
the
the
Democrats.
Democrats,
So he's
right.
like, oh, well, then it's the Democrats. Yeah.
Yep.
And there was only like 2 or 3 Democrats out there talking about impeachment. Maxine Waters being one of them.
Right.
You know, and not for Maxine was talking about impeachment for a myriad of reasons, mainly because she doesn't like him.
Right.
You know, but you know, and that's why that new Congresswoman, she got in trouble like a few weeks ago, where she said like impeach the motherfucker. You know, like those things like those are. that's the narrative that Republicans want.
Yeah.
And I don't put I don't mean to use all Republicans. There are a lot of Republicans who do not think like the Trump world. I mean Trump Republicans also all
because it is a different breed of Republican.
It's a different breed.
It is.
They are definitely the tethered. You've seen
us reference.
Yes,
go see the movie.
They're definitely tethered to that. Wow. So like I think for people out there, it's gonna if you listen to the podcast Slow Burn, it will continue to be a slow burn, but at the same time, don't be discouraged by these principal findings, because there's going to be a lot more that we're going to obviously hear. But at the same time, focus on, what's next in terms of who you want to see get elected as president.
Yes.
And don't let the noise. We just so surrounded by noise all the time. That just like really focus on what you want and don't be focused about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I don't even think I followed Donald Trump on Twitter.
I don't follow him, but I used to go there daily.
No, he just pops up.
Yeah,
on my
you don't have to.
You don't have to. So like, don't get wrapped up in all of that. It's like, don't get wrapped up in other people's drama. Mm-hmm. Or
that's
or their cancel culture.
Or their cancel culture. All right, so like as you know, on every episode we end with a spotlight on a organization, community, person, whatever, whoever's doing good in this world. So, Karmel, who do we have this week?
This week we're going to spotlight the Yacht Girls Book Club, whose mission is to bring women together over intellectual conversations in a fun, adventurous setting, and reminding everyday working class women to take a break, enjoy girlfriend time again. And it started with just 6 women getting together, and now it's grown to several hundred women over the past few months. And they just do a lot of great events. They have organic networking events, and a lot of it's just to have women come together and then just, business minded, artistic minded, and just kind of do things that help them get back to, and you talked earlier about relaxing and chilling, but at the same time, it's a lot of business happening. So Yacht Girls Book Up, check them out. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Yacht Girls Book Club.
I love it. All right. Well, Drexel, we want to thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Where can the people find you and all your political rantings?
At Drexel Heard. I don't do as many political rantings as I normally do on
Mostly
on
just
Twitter.
It's those group texts.
It is in the group text, and every once in a while I show up on BBC Radio as a political analyst as well. It's a lot of fun, and I'm so glad I was here to talk through that. I'll be back anytime to talk through Schoolhouse, so I can Schoolhouse Rock at any time.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Yeah.
I think I still have the disc set of Schoolhouse Rock somewhere in my parents' house.
YouTube it if you don't know what we're talking about.
Yes.
Maybe you should make the outro music. I'm just a bill, just in case.
I'm not gonna pay for those rights.
Yeah.
I don't know if I actually
sing your version.
I can sing my version and re-record.
Yes.
I'm just a bill. Well, again, thank you so much for listening. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Instagram and Facebook at We Need to Talk the Podcast, and Twitter @ We Need to Talk _ If you like what you're hearing and you are engaging in this conversation, make sure you hit that subscribe button, comment, and rate on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube.
Yeah.
And if you have any comments, questions, or topics that you think that we need to talk about, make sure you hit us up on social media. All right.
Now, thanks, Drexel.
Take care. Thanks, Drexel.
Later,
Bye,
y'all.
guys.